Good afternoon and welcome. My name is Rebecca Dee Edmondson-Korom. I'm an attorney here in the Winthrop area, and I've been asked by WCAT to bring forward some programming regarding estate planning. And I brought a guest with me today as well, local priest from St. John's Episcopal Church, Walter Connelly.
Hi, Dee Dee.
Hey, thanks for coming. So, one of the things I wanted to first start talking about is a healthcare proxy and why that is important. Now, this is a piece of paper that you fill out in the presence of a notary that tells the healthcare providers and your family who you would like to make decisions about your healthcare if you are incapacitated. This can be signed. This can be generated easily at your doctor's office or through a lawyer as well. But it helps make sure that there are people to make decisions for you when you can't make decisions for yourself. Have you had any experience with people in the healthcare proxy?
Oh, yeah. Well, not just parishioners, but family as well.
Yeah.
And not always being prepared.
Right.
All these things should be done before you need them.
Absolutely.
So, and even if you got it, you got to make sure that these healthcare institutions have a copy.
Absolutely.
We had a problem with my dad. They intubated him when he specifically didn't want it. In retrospect, it worked out fine, but still, even if you do it, you have to make sure that you have multiple copies shared with all your medical professionals. And depending on what your health is at home, to have it visible, and in addition to the advanced healthcare directives,
Absolutely.
which you'll get to later. But.
Well, let's get to that now. So one of the things I put together estate plans for clients, which include the healthcare proxy and also advanced directives. I personally have had experience with clients calling from the hospital looking for the documents. What I always say is make sure you keep the original in a very safe place, fire safe or as my mother always does, the lockbox at the bank. But also make copies for your healthcare providers. You can upload them now to your healthcare record, like MyChart with Mount Auburn or something like that. And then additionally, advanced directives. This is what you want for, do you want to be hooked up to an air machine? Do you want to be hooked up to machines? How would you like people to deal with your health care if you were incapacitated and in a vegetative state and things like that? So you want to make sure that not only do all your healthcare providers, but your family as well, because sometimes during crisis, family have other ideas about what to do.
That is the first and foremost step in planning for the future in these regards, is the conversation with your loved ones.
Absolutely.
However you define them. Could be family, could be close friends, but to have a conversation so that someone else knows your wishes, that's the first step. Before even getting anything on paper, have the conversation.
Have the conversation.
And if you need someone to help facilitate that, maybe your local pastor or a therapist or even a lawyer can help
Absolutely.
facilitate the conversations and lay out the important components and benefits. Because sometimes we're our own worst enemies.
This is very true. I always like to say that there's nothing like an emergency to make families go crazy. So you want, in those crazy times, you don't want to be making critical decisions. You want those critical decisions to be already made. Mm-hmm. So in the good times, you want to make sure that you ask the person you want to denote as your healthcare proxy, if they're comfortable making the decisions that you want. And then also have a backup, because make sure that person is if that person is not available, then you want the backup to be there as well. And you also want to give them a copy after you execute your healthcare proxy.
Do you need to ask the person first?
I would say yes. Don't just assume that they want to do that job.
It's a very weighty responsibility that some people will back away from. So please talk to them first.
Absolutely. And going on from a healthcare proxy, but a power of attorney as well.
Power of attorney, and again, When do you get power of attorney? When you're incapable of making decisions?
Sometimes.
No, before.
Right, well, yes. So a power of attorney is a document that allows somebody to step in your place to do all your financial stuff.
And it's good to have it in place. It doesn't need to be used.
Correct.
You could have it years in advance, and then when it's needed, it can be activated.
So there's two types of power of attorney. One is you sign it and it becomes a power of attorney immediately. A lot of people who are married, husbands and wives, sign these so they can sign each other's name to documents and things like that. However, there's also a different type called springing. It springs into action when you are incapacitated. And why do you need this type of document? So you need this type of document to make sure the bills get paid on time, and people can access your money to pay the mortgage, to pay the bills, to keep the lights on, and things like that, while you are not able to. This not just an accident, vegetative state, going into a coma or something like that, but also in the event of Alzheimer's or dementia. So whoever you want to name, you also need to have a conversation with them. And you also make sure that you trust them with your money as well. So those are the two documents that you need to have during your lifetime that are vitally important in the times of crisis. But you also need a will. And people always ask me, why do I need a will? I don't have anything. You always have something. People always have something. You have the rugs on your floor, the jewelry in your jewelry box, the books on your shelf, not to mention retirement assets, life insurance, and all sorts of other things in a will. If you do not have a will, and your family will have to go through a great process with the court system in order to get access to everything. And you probably don't want to put them through that. Additionally, if you don't have a will and you don't have family, you have a high prospect of anything that is in your estate going to the state. And I always tell people, you've already paid enough in taxes. You don't need to give any more to the state when you pass. So this is why wills are very important. Have you ever had to deal with a will? Or people?
Oh yeah, dealt with multiple wills,
Yeah.
except my own, so I will plead guilty.
We're getting them in next week, hopefully.
Yeah. But having a will greatly facilitates dissolving any remaining assets without going through probate. My dad was a lawyer. My uncle was a lawyer. My uncle died without the proper legal documents. And as I say, the cobbler's kids have no shoes.
We're always the worst, doing our own paperwork.
So my dad got off the dime, got the will together, and it greatly facilitated when I had to execute everything for him, and the same for my mom. It's never an easy process, but imagine if I didn't have the will in place, it would have been excruciating.
Right.
But the one thing that maybe you can address for them is there is things that you sign you name
That's
as a
right.
beneficiary, which is separate from the will.
That is true. So there's two categories that are separate from a will. One is retirement benefits, and the other is life insurance. Those two types of items, whether it be a 401k, 403b, pensions, all of that, and also all life insurance from Colonial Penn or wherever you get it from, it's going to go to the beneficiary.
Let's just add. Okay.
But if you don't have a beneficiary,
I had a case when I first came to Winthrop. This couple, been together for years, but they never got married, and the gentleman died. And he had never changed the beneficiary on his insurance. So it went to the first spouse. And it left the partner, the present partner, without any assets. And, apart from any religious, theological, ethical issue, marriage protects you in so many levels.
it does.
And if you're not going to get married, there are legal instruments to utilize
Absolutely.
to protect those interests.
Absolutely.
And one of them is your brain.
Yes.
Remembering to change your beneficiaries.
Just remember this also, if you have a will and you get a divorce, your will becomes invalidated. So you have to go forward and do another will. Now your healthcare proxy stands though, so does your power of attorney. Now, I'm just saying, once you get a divorce, you also might not want your ex making healthcare and monetary decisions because there's probably a reason you got a divorce in the first place. So I want to address that because that is, people tend to not think about these things until it's too late. And one of the things I want to prevent, put out there is I'm trying to go for prevention, right? I want to make sure that people have their stuff in line so that I don't get emergency calls or you don't get emergency calls in the middle of the night. The last thing though, is final arrangements. And that's what I put together as part of my estate plan when I do estate planning for clients. You got a will, you got a healthcare proxy, you got a power of attorney, advance directives on what you would like to do, but also final arrangements. And I find that...
That's a euphemism.
Oh,
What
yes?
is final arrangements?
What would you like as a celebration of life?
Right.
And that's a part of my estate planning. What would you like? Would you like a religious ceremony? Would you just like a party? I've had people come in and say, I just want my wife to decide, or I just want my kids to decide. And then I've had other people saying that they wanted their, cremation and put their ashes in a pod with a tree seed and have them planted. I've had people that wanted open bar celebration of life parties with a New Orleans jazz band, and I always address that just because I don't think a lot of lawyers cover that, but I think it's important. As a religious person, I think it's very important to me. I know my grandfather had everything planned out, including the songs, by the time he passed, so.
They can get very detailed. So when it comes to final arrangements, such as wakes and funerals and burial, there are two things to keep in mind. The first one is your wishes, what you would like done to celebrate you and how you would like your remains treated. So in that regard, a conversation with your loved ones about, do you want to be buried in a coffin, in a grave? Do you want to be cremated? Do you want your ashes scattered somehow? These are conversations to have, because if you have definite ideas, you will relieve the burden of making that decision, and they can follow your wishes. There's nothing more traumatizing for a grieving family. I don't know what Mom wanted. Mm-hmm. So have the conversation. So the first thing is to respect the wishes, your wishes. Mm-hmm. But the other thing to bear in mind is that wakes and funerals and burials even are for the living. Mm-hmm. It serves the purpose of allowing loved ones and family to grieve. And we all have certain issues, even baggage, when it comes to what we've experienced in our life with regard to mourning rituals. And we may think they're excessive. We can both remember as kids the 3-day grieving process, the multiple wakes, mm-hmm. and then and people will look at that and say, that's too much, mm-hmm. and it's a waste of money, in some people's opinion. In other people, it serves a purpose mm-hmm. to gather the family. And a lot of these rituals are now gone. And people, who don't have a religious community, are somewhat adrift mm-hmm. and feel like they're making something from scratch. Mm-hmm. But you have to do something that respects you as the deceased person, as well as the family. The family needs to be able to grieve in a comfortable way. So I've had situations where the kids were raised in one religion and the parent was another, and they would still come to the Episcopal Church, even though the rest of them may have been Roman Catholic mm-hmm. or Methodist, and but that wasn't how they were used to worshiping. Right. So it's a delicate balance, and it should be handled pastorally. That's going to serve the needs of those who are grieving, as well as respecting the wishes. So it's not a black and white situation. There's things to look at.
Lots of gray.
Lots of gray.
Lots of gray. So now we discussed having the conversation with family, having a conversation with the people, your healthcare proxy, and your power of attorney. But also, I wanted to throw out there, you need to have an executor of your will. And I'm just going to say, it's easier if it's the same person, basically, as your healthcare proxy and power of attorney. So you can have a seamless transition from responsibility during life to afterlife. It's just sometimes you need, if you were going to name different people, one healthcare proxy, one power of attorney, you can also do co-executors, two people being your executor. Just make sure those two people get along, okay? Just make sure that if you're naming two different people, you can just make sure they get along. And if they both can't just agree on the color of the sky being blue, then those two people probably should not be named as somebody to be in charge of each other. So, but your executor can also is usually the person I would name to make your final arrangements as well. But I also want to throw out there, just make sure if you are an executor or you're talking to somebody about being your executor, power of attorney, healthcare proxy, make sure they know how to do math, basically. Make sure they know how to do paperwork. Make sure they know how to do finances. Make sure that they are competent to do those types of things at the time of signing. I recently had a case where somebody named one of her children, to be the executor of the estate, and that person did not have the capacity at the time of signing, nor at the time when that person passed, in order to administer an estate. There is a lot of responsibility when there's real estate, assets, financial assets, and everything like that. You need to have either a really good attorney and a great executor in your corner to make sure that everything goes smoothly, or you're going to end up, and we did, in court over basically misappropriation of funds and all sorts of things because the person didn't know what they were doing. And obviously that's probably not what you want for your estate or your family or anything like that. So an ounce of prevention it helps after the passing, whether it be from your side or my side of things. Just make sure people get along, that they have capacity to do the things you want them to do, that they have the ability to do the things that you want them to do to administer your estate. Another thing that's really great is if you get a life insurance policy or you prepay for the funeral arrangements. I know this is very popular with boomers. My mom just made sure that I knew where her burial policy was. But it's also something people don't think about, especially younger people. I'm not young anymore, but I used to be. And I never thought about prepaying for anything. But now it's on my mind because I've been writing so many things and I'm asking people, do you have a burial policy? A lot of times with the state, if you're a state worker, they give you a $5,000 policy. Now, obviously, I don't think $5,000 is going to get it. But when I got it in 2004, when I started working for the state, that was great. And it's still going on. And so, just make sure the expenses of all of your arrangements can be, that you don't, if you have zero in your estate, then you're not going to get the final arrangements that you want, basically.
So a lot of times when it comes to being an executor, or what I think they also call it is legal representative.
Personal representative.
Personal representative. Yep. You don't know until you've dealt with it. Or as my Nana used to say, you don't know it smells until you step in it.
Exactly.
So, but once you've done it, you finally get it when people say, oh, you need to be prepared. And then once you've lived through it, you're like, oh, wow, I wish I knew this and that beforehand. And we were fortunate in that my dad was a lawyer, so at least his firm walked us through things. And having a good legal support is essential if there's any complications. Now, granted, then you may not have much to worry about, but if you do, got to get that legal support. No one's meant to go through this life alone, and you need help.
Amen.
So I've often had a question, now I got you in the hot seat. So
Fire
if you
away.
don't, if you left someone out of your will, someone close to you, family-wise, could they have a right to contest your will?
I'll take that in two parts. First, it depends on where they are in consanguinity, which means how are they kin to you? If it is a child, if it is a spouse, you have to explicitly write them out in the will itself. If you leave them out completely, there is a contest. They can contest that will.
Okay.
There's this thing called the spousal share law as well. So even if you write your spouse out of the will, she or he still is entitled to a third, regardless, unless there's some sort of pre-existing prenup, disclaimer, all sorts of things. But so if you leave your spouse out, that is also, you can be contested. Now, if you don't have any children, you don't have a spouse, the next in line is brothers and sisters, and they would, leaving them out is not exactly fatal.
I thought it was parents.
It's usually
If your parents are still alive, because that's what
that's
happens.
true. Usually parents are not still alive,
Right.
so my apologies. Yes, parents and brothers and sisters. Then they would inherit, but the will would control.
Okay. There are a lot of pieces, and you think if everyone plays nice, it shouldn't be a problem. But not
nobody
everyone
plays
nice.
No, not everybody plays nice. Large families, small families, they've all been in front of me in my office talking about how someone's embezzling from the estate, somebody's misappropriating funds, not doing what they said they would do, selling off personal belongings without, selling off personal belongings and pocketing the money, basically. I had somebody that they signed over the car to me before they died, or they gave me a gift of $100,000 before they passed. So the $100,000 is in court right now, and so it's one will contest, misappropriation of funds. Again, don't name somebody that doesn't know how to do that, and we'll just take the money and run. Basically.
We had that situation at the church where someone thought they were doing the right thing and gave money to the church without properly going through it, and Dee Dee had to look into it. And the poor guy ended up in trouble because he had followed the widow's request, but it was a non-revocable trust.
Yeah, and so that's a whole other episode. Stay tuned for trusts. People. That is a whole other part of estate planning. That's kind of like, we're talking entry level today. Trust is another level, but it's valid because a lot of people put their homes in trust. A lot of people create a trust in order to distribute money for generations to come. And they have some hard and fast rules. And not every state is the same. I mean, we do have the Universal Probate Code in most of the states, except Louisiana. And, what you just have to be very careful when you change these things or touch these things, because they could have some, tax implications, or like in our case, or in the church's case, you're getting bequests, you're bequesting money, and then all of a sudden somebody's like, oop, we did that wrong, we need the money back, or you're not getting any more money until coffers equalize, which is unfair as well to us, but it righted itself eventually. But you just have to be very careful about trusts in general. They are great tools to transfer wealth, evade taxes, and also, what everybody is concerned with is the Medicaid spend down, the 5-year look back on the Medicaid spend down. But you can definitely put your house in a trust, you can put things in trust, but just know when you do things like that, you have to give up certain control of those assets. And that is for another time, but goes with the whole adage of make sure you name somebody that you can trust, that knows what they're doing. Do we have any? I think we're good.
So what are the two definite things in life, Dee Dee?
Death and taxes.
Okay.
All right.
So don't run away from realities. Pay your taxes.
Get an
Prepare for
estate
the
plan.
end.
Get an estate plan. Make sure you have all your ducks and paperwork in a row. Thank you for your time today.
And as a wise rabbi once said, go with God, but go.